Hello, everyone. We're going to wait for 1 more minute and then we'll start.
We've had 40 reconfirmed participants. So we'll just wait and see. If not, we'll just start and people will keep streaming in.
Perfect. You're always maybe until 5.
Sarah, I just want to say I have to jump off at 4 because there is the COVID Alliance meeting which was scheduled in, which I had completely forgotten about, like an idiot.
Jeru, if that's okay with you, we're going to start. I don't have your answers, but I guess that's a yes. So welcome everyone to this roundtable, Creating and Enabling Social Entrepreneurs. I will ask all of you, as you already did, to mute your microphone to make sure that we can all hear our important guests today and the discussion during the event that will go after the panel. So my name is Sarah Prince-Robin. I work at the French Ministry for an Ecological and Solidarity Transition as the diplomatic advisor to the High Commissioner for Social and Solidarity Economy and Social Innovation. Catalytic 2030 is a network of high-performing social entrepreneurs and innovators who have implemented intervention at scale. Our community includes leading social entrepreneurs recognized by Ashoka, Eco-Green, the Schwab Foundation, the Skoll Foundation, and of course other global networks of social entrepreneurs. It is rapidly expanding to the government, just as I am, funders, bilateral institutions, multilateral institutions, and others seeking the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Catalytic 2030's members are active now in 176 countries, directly reaching 1 in every 10 people on the planet and a much higher proportion of those most at risk of being left behind. They have already helped deliver significant progress on challenges in areas such as food security, employment and livelihoods, rural integration, sanitation, gender equality, female empowerment, health and mental health, financial inclusion, digital integration, and social cohesion, to name a few. As a leading network of proven social entrepreneurs, Catalytic 2030 is willing to respond to the COVID crisis, both as agreeably the worst global health, humanitarian, and economic crisis of our lifetimes, but also as a unique opportunity to build back better together. So we are committing to deploying our entrepreneurial approaches built on our close partnerships with communities on the ground to help to get the world back on track to achieve the optimistic vision of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. In early July, we will launch a practical report outlining big ideas and strategies for responding to and recovering from the COVID-19. Based on an intense 2-month campaign of conversations and consultations like this one today, within and beyond the Catalytic 2030 community, the Catalyzing Change COVID-19 Action Plan will set out policies, recommendations, and interventions, which, according to the practical experience of our social entrepreneurs, have the greatest potential to drive positive systematic change when deployed at scale. So we believe that in partnership with governments, philanthropy, business, and other funders, this socially entrepreneurial ideas will accelerate both COVID-19 recovery and the achievement of SDGs. So the aim of today's event, creating and enabling social entrepreneurs, is to exchange on the government infrastructures which need to be in place to facilitate social entrepreneurs to accelerate the achievement of SDGs. Indeed, the UN Interagency Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy brings together UN agencies and other intergovernmental organizations, as well as an umbrella of association of social economy networks as members and observers. It has worked on a draft resolution for several years now, and the moment has come to bring it forward. Despite all the international agreed references, not a single international document tackles the social economy in all its aspects, and particularly its contribution to inclusive and sustainable development with positive impacts on people and the planet. So a resolution on social economy would fill a significant gap left in the 2030 agenda. A resolution on social economy would provide the opportunity for focused exchange and learning by member states, guiding UN agencies on priorities area of work on social economy and documenting of its contribution to sustainable development. The resolution would therefore contribute to improved policymaking and implementing, particularly in countries and society farthest behind, leading to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 agendas and realizing the SDGs. So today we will ask you to be a part of the journey to make it concrete proposals. I will ask each of the panelists and the participants to focus on the government infrastructures and support that needs to be put in place to facilitate social entrepreneurs to accelerate the achievements of the SDGs. These elements will then be analyzed, and the idea is at the end to have up to 6 or 7 key propositions that Catalyst 2030 will be able to present to the UN task force as well as to government, which we'll discuss then further and negotiate at some point to achieve the adoption of a resolution we hope in a near future. So let's not wait, and let me introduce the first panelist. So Dan Berelovitz from Spring Impact. He's the founder and CEO of Spring Impact. Spring works with the world's most promising social solutions to end the world's greatest social needs. So at Spring, Dan has developed successful scaling strategies for over 140 organizations, including Nike Foundation, Shell Foundation, Oxfam, PSI, and Health Foundation. Dan developed Scale Accelerator and a program to scale up the grantees of the 9 largest funders in the UK. So Dan authored the Social Replication Toolkit, which has been used by over 4,000 social ventures globally. Dan is a regular presenter, a writer, closer, close social leadership fellow, young global leader at the World Economic Forum, and has a diploma in management from Nottingham University, and is a Rothschild Fellow at the Cambridge Judge Business School, and graduated from the Harvard Kennedy School Executive Education Program. He is a founding trustee of the Bike Project for Refugees and Asylum Seekers. So Dan, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and thanks for inviting me here. So Spring Impact and Village Reach, Melissa West is on this call, will be speaking as well. We've been working for about a year or so to develop a learning network, a network really to think about how social entrepreneurs can work more effectively with government to scale up their solutions. And I'll leave Melissa to talk more about the actual learning network, and we hope that you'll many of you on this call will be interested in engaging with that. What I'd like to talk about is just really to give an overview of the research that we did focused on how government and social entrepreneurs can work together to scale solutions. And I want to start with, first of all, just an overview, which is that there are a number of ways that social organizations and social entrepreneurs can work with government. We were really focused on the government actually adopting the solution, so working very practically with the social entrepreneurs to take it to scale. And that could be either taking the whole solution, adopting it and running it in its completeness, or working long-term with the social entrepreneur or the social organization in partnership to deliver the solution. So the 5 stages that we worked on, that we saw during the lifespan of a program scaling up to national scale, started with phase 1, co-design. So at the first phase, working very closely with government to make sure that both government and the social entrepreneurs are co-designing, there's real ownership. And at that stage, what we found most helpful on the government side, which is what I'll be covering through this, is for the government to really have published transparent national plans and metrics so that it's possible to have a really clear idea of how the social program can fit into those metrics. And second of all, to have a point person, a really clear person with clear responsibility to engage in the process, and potentially even government having the mechanisms for engaging in co-design officially. At the second stage, once you've co-designed and the intervention is working successfully, is what we call the prove stage. So at the prove stage, it's about getting a really strong indication of impact and financial sustainability and scalability. So those three things: impact, the finances need to work in some way, and they need to be scalable. What the government can do at this stage to support this work of proving is data collection. So really help with the mechanisms to gather data. And secondly, officially endorse the innovation, proactively share with other teams and departments. This is the point where we saw governments who are working most effectively really becoming advocates for the program and sharing it internally. Once the intervention was proven, then we move on to the visioning stage. And visioning is really about designing the perfect end state for what this looks like when it's at scale. How is government and the social entrepreneur going to work together? So it's really strategy around how to take it to scale. And what we found at that stage, the governments and social entrepreneurs that were most successful, first of all, dedicated resources actively to engage with each other. So there really has to be an effort on both sides to dedicate resources to the partnership and leave time for thinking. It takes quite a bit of thought and work. And the second is to begin to establish mechanisms for overseeing the spread of the innovation. So to think about how it can be monitored over time. So that's stage 3. Stage 4, which is embedding. This is really about beginning to practically scale this to actually deliver the plans that you've envisaged. So at this stage, it's government can be most helpful by really helping to identify individuals responsible for implementation across government, across teams, at the highest level, all the way through to local level. And second of all, ensure that there really is the resource in these systems for both quality management and troubleshooting, and of course to run the innovation itself, but to make sure that the government is constantly engaged in that process of refining and making it better. And then the fifth stage we saw was really when the intervention is at scale. It's already, the clinics, for example, have scaled up across a whole country, and it's about working together with government to keep on track. And at this point, it's really important that both government and the innovator has strategic oversight. There's clear and regular meetings. There's a process to adapt and learn based on the evidence that comes out. And there's an ongoing focus on sustainability. We saw in particular at this stage, there's so much effort to get to scale that by the time you're actually at scale, people can lose some energy on the advocacy piece. But we know that governments change regularly and the people in charge change. So just this constant mechanism for constant advocacy for the intervention at scale, so it sustains and continues to make impact. So that was the overview of the 5 stages. We're actually publishing, we're going to publish this research in the not too distant future. So we'll have some slides and things in writing. I'm happy to share more if you message me directly, but I'd like to hand over to, well, I'll hand back to Sarah, but Melissa will carry on talking a bit more about our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. And we all wrote the 5 big steps, and I'm sure we can finalize a synthesis of something. And I know what you talk about when you say that there's a lot of change in government, so that's why maybe a focal point that doesn't change every time would be very important for social entrepreneurs to know one person they can talk directly to. So we'll go to the second panelist. So it's Mariam Awais from the government of Nigeria. So she's the current special advisor to the President Muhammadu Buhari on social investment. She's a legal practitioner and human rights activist with over 36 years cognate law practice experience, including the Kano State Ministry of Justice, the Nigerian Law Reform Commission, and the Central Bank of Nigeria. So Mariam, the floor is yours. We can hear you. Put the microphone on, Mariam.
Yes.
I think that's good. Yes, perfect.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for the opportunity to engage on this very interesting and potential engagement with so many brilliant minds and initiatives across the nation. I'm specifically going to talk about how to engage with a country that's as complex and as diverse as Nigeria. First, to talk about how, as a federation, we have different states that have the mandates constitutionally to engage with the very issues that the entrepreneurs are doing very well in. So education, it's climate change, it's health, it's logistics. A lot of it is done at state level. And so the federal government generally tends to coordinate what is happening. It sets standards and a framework, offers incentives because it cannot impose its will on the different states. Every state is autonomous. So bearing that in mind, what we proposed was to engage in a country like Nigeria. The important thing is to convey what the possibilities are, what the offering is, what the different entrepreneurs are doing in their spaces, and how they can facilitate our being able to attain the SDGs. Having done that, the government at federal level would be able to encourage the states to engage with the ideas and come up with what their priorities are. And if maybe the states don't come up with their priorities, the social entrepreneurs can actually engage with a mapping process to ensure that they are able to map who the actors are and where the entrepreneurs are in country, and how the policies and the documentation, what has happened in the past, where we are on each SDG or the SDG of interest that we feel we need to really ramp up on. And then also to ensure that we have a baseline on how to progress on that particular SDG or the few SDGs that we feel we need to work with. Then the other thing, of course, is in a country like ours, we have a dearth of resources. We're predominantly oil dependent, and of course, oil prices have crashed. So even for ordinary, running of government, we don't have enough. So we'll really need a lot of support in terms of funding and how we can find the resources. And of course, I believe that the Catalyst 2030 and members, the social entrepreneurs and innovators can support us in trying to find out how we can actually find the resources and even sort out, what the avenues are and how the structures for engaging with those resources. Then there will be a convening of the stakeholders in the state that has agreed or has agreed with the possibility, the baseline, and the mapping. The stakeholders will be engaged and agree on how, what the possibilities are in the state. Then an issue-based action plan would be developed, working with the state actors. And then, of course, monitoring and evaluation is also very critical. So we would need feedback all through, and having listened over the months to the kind of expertise we have in Catalyst 2030, I'm sure that there is a lot that can be done in terms of putting in structures for feedback and analysis and research to make sure that we're able to overcome a lot of these issues, the barriers, and improve on efforts and make it even sustainable. Then, of course, the entire plan itself may need to be adjusted as we go along. So that is also something that we can work with the entrepreneurs for. I believe if we make this presentation, and also include the fact that we have to celebrate the accomplishments. So we have people there that with there will be national campaigns, and the celebrities would come in and really publicize what we've been able to achieve. That would, introduce the issue of peer pressure and stimulate even those other states that are not involved in this process. And so it will now give the potential for growth and scale across the country. We have 36 states. I don't know if you can hear me. It's raining cats and dogs here. So,
we can hear you, no problem.
We can engage champions for that purpose. And bearing in mind all of these steps, I believe there's a lot that can be done and should be done, because Catalyst 2030 is about one humanity and seeing how we can attain these SDGs as fast as possible, irrespective of the constraints and the pitfalls and the barriers. I mean, this affords us the opportunity of leapfrogging into spaces and avoiding all the mistakes that have been made. And so it's something we really look forward to. And I'm hoping that many entrepreneurs will get interested in what Nigeria, I know Nigeria, I've listened, appears to some to be a very daunting task, but if you get it right in Nigeria, you can do it anywhere in the world. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mariam. That was a very inspiring speech again. Just to make sure, there has been some question in the chat for Dan for your 5 steps that people want to know about. So of course we will spread it as soon as it's out. What I can say is that we already feel that there are some support that comes either from Dan and Mariam about a national plan. I think Mariam talked as well, of course, then of states, but I think that's very important. That should be co-built with the actors, and the fact of monitoring and evaluation both came in your both intervention. So I think that's something we should, start to work on. I think that could be one of the focus of the priorities that we can work on and ask to make sure that then each countries work on a national plan, for example. So we can continue to discuss about that later in the discussion. Now we'll go to Melissa that Dan already talked about. So Melissa West is the Director of Advocacy at Village Reach, where she works at Motivate Collective Action that transforms healthcare delivery in Sub-Saharan Africa. So Village Reach approach to sustainable solution impact at scale is based on co-creation with governments and eventual government ownership. In partnership with Spring Impact, she leads a learning network to engage stakeholders in mutual learning and iteration on practices that support government ownership of solutions. So prior to Village Reach, Melissa worked as a Senior Program Officer for Policy and Advocacy at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on Health, Immunization, and Polio Eradication. And she will also, we might have a guest that couldn't be there from the WHO today, so she'll speak for both, but she will explain it better than I do. So Melissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I thought a quick visual could be helpful to highlight one piece of information that we have received based on more than 40 stakeholder interviews, probably more than about 60 interviews in the preparation for the development of the tool that Dan mentioned. And I also see that my colleague Upile Kachila, who has been working with government over the past couple of years on transitioning one of Village Reach's solutions, just joined the call. So I may put her on the spot for a moment. But I think it's very important to mention that this process has to start with co-creation. And I thought I would just have everyone take a look at a couple of the quotes that have come out of our research, because I think they really illustrate some of the issues that we see when we try to kind of bring social entrepreneurs into a process. I'll give everyone a second to read that. And then here's another quote from maybe the other side, which is how governments can kind of sort through the numbers of innovations that they know are available. And I just wanted to plug, we do have this report that summarizes all of the interviews, and really it's looking at the interaction between governments, social entrepreneurs, or NGOs, and then funders. And so we can put that in the chat as well and share it as a follow-up, where there's a lot more detail on where we got to with these. But I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment and share with you what I had hoped that Dr. Moradrek Chibi from WHO was going to join us for today. He had a previously scheduled meeting with the regional director at WHO and thought he could get out of it, but it turned out he wasn't able to. So I apologize on his behalf. He's really excited to be involved in this effort. And so Dr. Chibi is the regional advisor for health innovation at the WHO Regional Office for Africa, so based in Brazzaville. And he's been designing and implementing programming across the 47 member states in the Afro region on innovation specifically. He just launched a program in November 2018 and is using that to develop a challenge for African social entrepreneurs. And then they're gonna actually roll out a strategy on scaling innovation in August. So what better person than him to speak about kind of what's happening from a bit of a macro level and understanding from the government perspective, what are some of the challenges. So basically when we talked, he boiled it down to two key things that needed to be addressed. There are managerial and political issues to support entrepreneurs, and there are operational issues. And at the managerial and political level, I mentioned co-creation, which is really the starting point. How do you engage with government from the beginning? But more than that, it's also a mindset shift of collaboration and change, and how governments can actually help a social entrepreneur embed into the system. One of the things that he mentioned was the need for alignment across sectors. So policies just in health are not going to enable entrepreneurs in other areas. And really we need to look at the infrastructure holistically and figure out a way to identify the coordination mechanisms and that collaboration structure across sectors. So he really thought that was key. I think a couple people have mentioned this, Mariam and Dan, just about identifying where social entrepreneurs can support the public sector, and then making sure that they're linked into the appropriate country strategies. So on the operational side, he really wanted to clarify that capacity building is needed to support government. So how we enable the infrastructure for that to happen at the lower levels, particularly where government may be resistant to change. And we've seen this in our own work, because sometimes reforms are difficult to implement, and particularly if there's not political cover. So what are the mechanisms that can support that government buy-in process? Other things that he mentioned was ensuring that there's solid evidence base that can be shared, and using government to actually lead the development of both the evaluation and then sharing those results across stakeholder groups, and dedicating resources, both financial and human resources, from the government side is really important. Before I say his most important thing, I'm gonna, Upile, see if you have anything to add on the operational side of what you have found most critical as you've been working in the Malawi government over the past couple of years to implement an innovation. Upile? Okay, maybe she'll come off in a moment. But let me just share what Dr. Chibi said as the most important thing needed from government to collaborate on innovations with social entrepreneurs. He said that there is a massive disconnect and that there has to be demand for innovations built from the government. He said government should take that up and own the agenda for social innovations, providing the necessary ingredients to make it happen, including friendly policies, incentives, funding, and more. And what I was really hoping that he could do is share some of his experiences working with, I don't think this is his actual title, but it's a special advisor in Niger who is essentially a minister of innovation and spearheading a transformation approach throughout the public sector. So perhaps in a future Catalyst 2030 call, we can get him to share a few words about his experience in actually doing this and also engaging in this process as we finalize the UN resolution. So I'm gonna stop there and look forward to hearing from other speakers about how this resonates or doesn't, other things they're hearing, and I look forward to continuing to engage in the discussion and dialogue with all of you who've joined. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And of course, the doctor will be very much welcome in future discussions and even between discussions on webinars on Zoom, but directly if he has inputs on concrete action that he's done and advice and changes or edits to the resolution, it will be definitely a good thing. And as Chiru just mentioned, we can present the report to him. Also, I saw in the discussion that Sue mentioned that she has seen a lot of governments change, so that's why we need to have something more structural. I think that's coming, in all of our discussion. We're gonna go with Karen Spencer. So she founded Whole Child International in 2004, when as a single mother of two, she discovered an absence of services to address the social and emotional well-being of children living in orphanages. So for the past 15 years now, she has led an international team to improve systems of care, advocate and influence policy, and conduct related research. She has provided the vision and strategic direction for the organization's growth with a passion for system change, sustainability, scalability, research, and third-party evaluation. The organization's scope has expanded to reach an even broader group of vulnerable children while retaining the original focus on emotional well-being. She is also co-author of articles published in the peer-reviewed Infant Mental Health Journal and Perspectives in the Infant Mental Health, contributing important insights and realistic solutions to the public debate. In 2010, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama came to Los Angeles, especially to lend his personal support to Whole Child. So in 2015, she was elected as a Ashoka Fellow for identifying and filling a gap in care for orphans and vulnerable children. In 2016, she was made a Fellow of the University of Northampton in the UK. And finally, in 2017, People magazine named her one of the 25 women changing the world. So that is great for feminism. So Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here today. What an incredible group of people. I'm learning a lot. And so much of my experience, so I'm not researching, but so much of what your research is showing echoes my journey as a social entrepreneur. So I originally started out, we were focusing on our intervention and our solution. And I've started to become a little bit allergic to the word solution, because I think the longer I do this, the more I recognize that there are no solutions for many of the problems that we're dealing with. And I think it's very interesting because I'm spending a lot of time in the last couple of years really in introspection about my own perspective on scale and what that means. And I think that what I've learned is that the real work for us as social entrepreneurs is to be approaching all of this with humility, because our solution that we want to scale It's not really, I don't think it's the right approach really. And I think that one of the ways, and it does echo what you're saying about co-creating, but I really think that we're our own worst enemy in attempting to work with government often, because we're constantly jamming our solution, trying to get people to do our solution. And I think that will be much more successful when we forget about our solution and come to the table to genuinely co-create, not kind of pretend to co-create, but actually do our solution, but genuinely co-create with government and be willing to look at ourselves as having some great experiences and previously done some really great work, and really embarking on the journey authentically co-creating. So that has been, once I stopped trying to scale my solution, is when we really started to get somewhere. I also think that ideally, if we're really looking at systems change, and this has been the really fun journey, we started out with direct implementation. We were working to improve the quality of care, and we had a theory that we felt that by making some simple changes to existing management practices, essentially, in quality of childcare, that we could have dramatic outcomes on the children. And our original premise turned out to be true. We had University of Pittsburgh's Office of Child Development come in and do a third-party evaluation, and in a period of 18 months, by stopping the rotation of children from group to group and reducing group sizes as much as we could, using the existing number of caregivers and the existing buildings, and changing nothing essentially to the exact structure, we were able to show that those changes in management practice, making sure that children were experiencing family-like groups, as well as training the caregivers to use everyday activities to actually connect with the children. So if you're going to tie Johnny's shoes and help him get dressed, you can be talking to your friend, or you can be talking to Johnny and remembering what a great day he had yesterday playing with his friend and helping him learn how to tie his shoes. Those simple practices, shifting from one way, which is very, adult-centered, to moving towards a child-centered practices that really focuses on supporting relationships and deepening them. We saw a 47% increase in children's height, a 37% increase in children's weight, and took the number of children scoring as though intellectually disabled from 82% at baseline down to 26%. So no change in food, no change in the number of caregivers. Saw this incredible intervention solution that worked. And at that point, of course, as a social entrepreneur, everybody was like, great, scale it globally, go, right? And of course we could have done, because we had great data and it was very compelling. But something inside of me thought, wait a minute, I don't believe we have actually cracked the nut here yet. So we kept expanding and continuing to learn and do those basic things better, but we kept measuring those initial interventions to see if they were sticking. And guess what? 2 years later, we had seen a little slip. Of course, there we go again about the funding systems change. No one is interested in funding a project 2 years after it's done to check and see if it's sustainable. But we did, out of unrestricted funding, continue to measure our impact up to 8 years out to see what was happening. And it wasn't sticking. And that's where the interesting introspection for us that led to the systems change passion originated. Because what happened was we realized that the directors of the centers and the people in government that we were working with that had committed to these policy changes and to these practices ultimately didn't really understand the why behind a lot of what we were asking them to do. And that's when we started to look inward and really figure out how we could actually create really sustainable change. I remember I had this really epiphany moment sitting on the floor of an orphanage, and two of the full-time psychologists walked by. And I said to my colleague, wait a minute, what's going on here that we've got two full-time psychologists with degrees in psychology from the local university who haven't clocked that it's terrible the kids are coming into contact with 50 to 70 kids, caregivers, before they turn 5? Where's the disconnect here? How can we create, what's going on at the ministry that they don't understand that they can't rock up in a car and pluck a kid out of the center to be adopted with no transition for the child or for the other children in their group. So we recognize that the real root cause of the badly run childcare was actually a lack of knowledge. And so we started to address at the government level. We developed a university certificate program to educate people on the basic best practices in child development. And we worked with the local university to create capacity and restructure their existing curriculum to move away from, I couldn't work out what's going on here. What are they teaching them? They've got a degree. Well, they were teaching them how to do assessments. So every 6 months, Johnny would come in and he'd be assessed, and they would say that Johnny had a speech delay. And so we're very fancy. I'm going to prescribe 45 minutes of speech therapist with our fancy speech therapist, because we're very fancy and we have a speech therapist that comes every 2 weeks. Meanwhile, no one's ever talking to Johnny, ever. And so the speech delay, no matter how much speech therapist, so it's really a deeper understanding of children and their needs and really addressing that root cause. So we then started, we now have a rather complex top-down, bottom-up approach to yes, we improve the quality. Yes, we are implementing those same best practices, but we're doing it while creating capacity within existing government infrastructure and teaching them to do the work that we do. So I would say, you know, the real work for us is humility, and there is the scaling of the solution, but it's not, we don't walk in with a thing that we're trying to implement, but rather some basic theories and some basic experience and some evidence. Then we work collaboratively with government to come up with what the solution is going to be for them.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. I think it was really interesting, and what we could see is how many people are getting involved as well in social entrepreneur solution. It's not only just the social entrepreneurs and the solution. Sometimes there's a lot of people around the solution, and this, as you said, scaling up is not just a word. There's a whole ecosystem, and you know, everyone is different, and so we need to be careful as well in willing. We have the same in France. We have made our program French Impact. Some solutions, if we can call it solutions, but local solutions, we want to put it national, but we won't do this for all of that, and because sometimes they don't even want, or the structure is not ready. They don't want that much funding that we could give them. So I think it's really interesting to, you know, work on both sides and to have the whole ecosystem as well included. And so our last panelist, and then we'll open for a discussion, either in the chat or if you want to have a little longer intervention, then you can ask to speak. But first, so we're going to have Martin Bird from Fundación Paraguaya. Dr. Martin Bird is founder in 1985 and CEO of Fundación Paraguaya, an organization dedicated to the elimination of poverty. Dr. Bird is a pioneer in applying microfinance, microfranchise, youth entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and technical vocational methodology. As part of that work, he has developed the Poverty Stoplight, a digital platform that allows families to self-diagnose their levels of poverty and design customized strategies to improve their livelihood. The tool is being implemented in over 20 countries, including the US and the UK. So, Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's beautiful to see everybody. Wow, we have been in a beautiful journey all these years. Well, we're still alive and kicking, and today is the beginning of the rest of our lives, and we have great things to do. So, with regards to promoting the SDGs, one of the things that we did in Paraguay is to help the government create a national social innovation strategy. So it as if it were their baby, their vision, and they have concerns that we may not be aware of or interested in. For example, the government of Paraguay is very concerned about the future that we have with Brazil, because we share a huge hydroelectric dam, and we have a treaty that needs to be renegotiated in 2 years. We are the largest hydroelectric energy exporter of the world. And right now, but when we signed the agreement with Brazil 40 years ago, they fixed the price at 1973 values. So, you know, big fish eat small fish, you know, the whole, whenever you hear Brazil speak against how angry they are against Europeans putting obstacles to their exports, you know, it's just very interesting. In any case, the government is very interested in the national energy use strategy. We are interested in poverty. Some aspects of the government are interested in child development. Right now, we have this crisis with COVID about the use of technology with education. So there is many, many, many concerns. In Paraguay, we have 15 ministries and 87 agencies. So we helped the government create this national social innovation strategy. That was a very important thing. Another thing that we did is we signed an agreement with the Minister of Foreign Relations, because in Paraguay, the Minister of Foreign Relations is the conduct with the United Nations and the SDGs. So even though they are not experts in hunger, in poverty, they are the conduct. So if you want to have any influence with the SDG, you have to talk with the diplomats. So that's what we did, and we are talking a different world. The people who deal with the Minister of Foreign Relations and who go to the UN in New York, they are talking about technical assistance and technical cooperation and international issues. So the thing is to think like them. Third, what we are doing is that we are now in a legislative initiative, even though we could call it a legislative offensive. We have prepared 3 laws, and we are going to be presenting the 3 laws this year to change the law of the land, to change the system. So we are having a poverty elimination law. We are associating poverty as slavery, and we want to abolish it. And we are using the example of abolishing slavery, or insisting that every child go to school, or insisting that every child has vaccines. So we're making it mandatory to elaborate programs so poor people can graduate from their social subsidies and have above the poverty line income. Another thing that we did with the SDGs is that we have operationalized them so that they are understandable by the people. The big problem that we see with the SDGs is nobody understands what they're talking about. It's too abstract. It is too academic. And people in the slums and in the rural village, they don't know what you're talking about. So we have used the poverty stoplight methodology, and we have personalized the SDGs. For example, my family earns sufficient income. My family eats nutritious food, and having people think of the SDGs as if it affects my family household. And it takes a different perspective. It gives it color. No, it gives it understandable, and then they will embrace. The thing is that in a country like Paraguay, nobody promotes the SDGs. They don't understand them. They're too far away from people's reality. So we need to personalize them. In addition to the poverty law, we have an education law that we are proposing, and we are also have a rural development law. So one of the things, and of course, this allows us to see government not only as the executive branch, but also Congress and also members of parliament. So we are developing a whole bunch of strategies to engage the different committees of parliament, because they are negotiating permanently with the executive branch. So this has been very, very important. And finally, we are having our stakeholders talk to Congress and talk to government, not only us. We're having the people in the villages and in the urban slums, they directly talk to senators and congressmen. And of course, that is very attractive to the politicians in the parliament. They are very sensitive to that. So if if you're just a social entrepreneur and you come from the NGO sector, they box you in there. But the minute you bring in people from the slums or people from the rural villages, people from Congress are very sensitive. And I agree also, and this is the last thing I'll say, with what the former president of the World Bank said at a meeting in New York a year ago. He said, "Do not concentrate on my problem, but on the problem." So we need to learn how to do that. Many times, as Karen was saying, we're trying to push our solution. Actually, we need to solve the problem, and government's perspective is very valid. They have a different perspective. They are in media saying, well, how is this going to affect the budget? And how is this going to affect the, they have a legitimate point of view. So in any case, in conclusion, what we are doing right now with SDGs in general and with certain SDGs in particular are promoting specific legislation to change the system. Because at the end of the day, the laws have to be in place, or else you're just trying to push a rope, and it's very, very difficult. So thank you for listening to me, and I'm ready to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Martin. I think it was really interesting how your point of view, the fact that you said that SDGs are far away from people. I think that's something that in all of our countries we can feel. So we need to personalize them. I don't know. Maybe that's one track that we can work on. As myself working in the government, I can totally recognize myself when we say that we have a different perspective. Even in our own government, sometimes we just fight because we don't have the same view as our Ministry of Finance. So I really appreciated the fact that you said that sometimes we need to think as the diplomats in New York. I think one point that will be important in future weeks when our work will be ready is the lobbying at New York for the permanent missions for the UN resolution adoption will be completely different than the one that we'll have to do for our own government in the different part of the world. Every time we have to put, to imagine ourselves in the shoes of the people that we are talking to. Your solutions definitely are working. I'm the big fan of social entrepreneurs, but sometimes you have to think in both shoes, and governments, you have to put, help them being in your own shoes as well. And that, I think joins what Karen said about humility and really co-building as well. I think because both sides can definitely learn from each other. So I think that was really, really interesting. And yeah, I think we should definitely work on that. I'll open the floor to different questions. I'll just take on the chat. If there's any question directly to people, I know that some of you, because we're not that many, so maybe we can take some intervention. Jiru told me that maybe Ellen or Alan, you may have something to add. I don't know. I'm picking somebody. But if you want to have questions or discuss what we just talked about, I don't know, maybe Sue as well. You have input and other people. Please tell us on the chat, and I'll give you the floor. So is anybody willing, or other panelists, to react to the other discussions? Please feel free.
May I ask a question, if it's okay?
Yeah, definitely. Go, Jiru. You don't even have to ask.
No. My question is actually to all the panelists and also to others who have worked with the government. We are hearing two direct trends. One is that we are working, and I'm trying to think also from the point of view of what we have to put into our report. So this is my question. At the government level, it's very clear that we need to co-create, collaborate, and we need to create a demand from the government, correct? So I think that is very clear. From the social entrepreneurs' point of view, what Martin is saying, what others are saying is we need to have a more client-centered approach. What, in your opinion, is the catalytic effect we need to have if we merge these two to really take scale through? So I would like to ask you all, because I think that is emerging through the whole series, and that I think is going to be the main thing which we need to take. So how do we change the government, but how do we also as entrepreneurs change in our approach? So if you all have any ideas or suggestions on that, I would really appreciate it, and also points for the resolution. But I'll leave the resolution part to Sue as she's working. But
Yes, maybe we'll go directly to Sue and then go back to all the panelists if you want. So maybe Sue, take the floor.
Eleanor.
Yes, my question is, what would the panel like to see included in the UN resolution? What would you like governments to commit to? Bearing in mind that Sarah has already warned us that you mustn't ask governments to commit too much, and if it costs too much money, they won't sign it off.
Yes, I'm sorry, sometimes I'm negative, but it has to be realistic, and but very concrete. I think social entrepreneurs really have to go forward in the resolution with concrete things. I don't know if one of the panelists wants to go first. If not, then maybe I'll start from the beginning. Maybe Dan, do you have something to add or answers? If not, then we'll go. But Dan, maybe.
Sure. I mean, there's so much to say, but I'll be brief. I think on the question on the UN resolution, I think publishing the starting point for the co-design would be publishing transparent national plans with metrics, but really putting in the necessary thought so that entrepreneurs, when they're engaging with those plans, those metrics are actually what the government wants to achieve. So that it's possible to co-design effectively. Of course, there's much more than that, but I think that is a great start. And then I really love the point in terms of the social entrepreneurs. When I talked through the 5 steps tool that we've developed, I just talked about government. There are also steps that social entrepreneurs can take at each stage as well, which I think we can circulate, and I won't go into detail now. But I think Karen's point about mindset change was a really excellent one. And I'm struck by, I moved out to Silicon Valley a couple of years ago, and there's this sort of adage in the venture capital space, which is that if you ask for money, you get advice. And if you ask for advice, you get money. And so I think how that would translate to this government space is that, don't ask for partnership, don't force scale, ask for advice, form a genuine partnership, be open, and then the money, which our currency is social change, will come.
Thank you, Dan. Marianne?
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it's been a very interesting conversation, and I'm really...
sorry, somebody is talking. Please mute your microphone so we can only hear Marianne. Thank you.
Yes, I said it's been a very interesting conversation, and clearly it can't be one size fits all for every country, but we can have some broad principles that the UN can adopt in terms of having a focal person in every country and at the UN itself, so that there's an ecosystem that's created even within the country. If it is a federation, I would like to see that in our country, and if there's a focal person, that focal person also is able to facilitate the creation, the appointment of similar focal persons at levels that are low, at subnational levels. I think that would be a very good position to adopt. I mean, this is my comment. I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. And Melissa?
Thank you. I'm just struck by all of the incredible ideas here, and it's so hard to synthesize one from all the many things that have been brought up and many things that I've heard from talking to various government. I think, though, the point about even going back to what Dr. Chibi was sharing with me about really disconnect and making government really own this process is this mechanism or infrastructure that's needed for innovation. And so if we can share examples about how that's been done effectively, and I think, Martin, you gave some great examples. I don't know if that's documented, but I would love to see almost like a blueprint for how this is done, so that there is something that countries can use to really follow in the footsteps of others who've been before and had success. But government can be a very, very overwhelming partner. And so looking at all the different levels and all the different sectors and making sure that there's a clear path would be very, very valuable, I think. From the social entrepreneur side, I keep coming back to something that one of my colleagues, Upile, who looks like she may have dropped off. I know the connectivity's been bad today, but she keeps coming back to the need for flexibility. And I think just Village Reach's experience, and we transitioned a health hotline recently to the government of Malawi, and Upile was responsible for that process over the past couple of years. But as political leaders change, as priorities change, we had to be flexible, and our priorities were not necessarily the government's priorities in terms of what needed to be funded as a part of what we thought was the core solution. And so just the flexibility that's needed on behalf of social entrepreneurs is so important. And I don't know that that's something that you actually put in the framework or UN resolution, but it's really the mindset that you need to have if you're going to achieve greatness together. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Melissa. Then I will go to Karen and then Martin to finish. And then I have some people that want to speak. So Karen, please.
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo what a lot of people have to say here. I think, the point person thing is obviously, a crucial piece just about at every level in terms of speeding up our ability to get to the right places. And I think that, I know that governments are often very under-resourced, and so that could be potentially a challenge, but that clearly could support us hugely. I think the way of looking at ourselves, actually, instead of looking at ourselves as being as trying to scale our solution, as well as, I'm sure we've all sat in a lot of meetings with consultants that governments have paid. And I know a lot of social entrepreneurs, we sort of, that person doesn't know anything. Why aren't they asking us? Well, the reason why they're not asking us is because frequently we're just trying to jam our solution down, and the consultant is sort of brought in as somebody who just has broad knowledge. And I think that we really do often have that broad knowledge, and our biggest successes have come from being that general support. And advocating, the ministries that we're working with are often so under-resourced. And if we can advocate for them to get better computers and to get some support, IT support, and if they perceive us to be less, I think governments are frequently frustrated by seeing huge sums of money go to aid organizations to create secondary systems to do work that fundamentally should be government functions often, but get done by large international NGOs. And if we can successfully position ourselves as authentically there to create capacity and support local infrastructure. And I think oftentimes the benefit to our solution approach, which all of us social entrepreneurs have, is that it's for a finite period, and we can really look at ourselves as here to come and support a big, broader vision, right? Not the adoption of our solution necessarily, but some bigger, larger aim in which we have an opportunity to play a small role. So for us, it's improving the quality of childcare broadly across all sectors. And if we recognize that that task is so huge and is going to involve so many parts, but if we authentically engage in this relationship as genuinely there to support what we recognize is so much bigger than us and is going to continue long before and before and after we're gone, then I think that's the right way and the most productive way of working together.
Thank you very much, Karen. I don't know if some of you speak French, but in French we say that we're working for the cause. I don't know how that would work in English, but that's definitely. Martin, for a final word on those questions. Microphone, Martin, please.
There are different SDGs and there are different social entrepreneurial solutions and approaches. One of the interesting things that happened last year at the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship is that the concept of social entrepreneur has expanded. And it has expanded to incorporate, for example, Mariam from Nigeria, who is a government social entrepreneur. There are academic social entrepreneurs who have been incorporated also, and business intrapreneurs. So we have the benefit of having more scope now. The beauty of having Mariam in this this meeting, not only is she a beautiful person, but she is the epitome of a idealist government official. I mean, unfortunately, there aren't that many. Many have become bureaucrats. Many have seen so many things that they have lost the illusion. But so we should really take advantage of Mariam Weiss's being part of this group to say, Mariam, where does your shoe hurt? What do you tell the president? I mean, think about a president with a big challenge. It's the president of Nigeria. That is a country that is big. You know what I mean? And so how can we help, for example, Mariam be successful with her president in promoting her agenda? And I think that this is a beautiful opportunity for us to empower her with everything that has been mentioned today. At the end of the day, the president of Nigeria wants to accomplish change in Nigeria, and Mariam wants to be a successful member of the cabinet. So how can we help her? What we are doing here in Paraguay is also we have obtained copies of the government plans, but specific operational plans. And we have said, listen, we're here to help you with these 4 weaknesses, to use a word, right? I can help you solve this problem. Really, well, for example, last week I had a big summit with the vice president and 3 cabinet members. And they just had a mental block. And then I was talking to, she says, Martin, how am I going to work with 3,000 government social workers in the field? I mean, these are people that are overworked, under budget. And how you want to give them more work? And I said, no, actually, I just want to support them. No, but I thought that you wanted to work with the villages. No. I want to support your staff. That I'm interested in. Can you support my staff? Yes. So I am now working to empower the government change agents in the field. And of course, I know that they're going to swallow the pill and they are going to love it. But they are because we forget that government people are also very needy. They're not, you know, so in any case, that is just one strategy. So in conclusion, how can we ask Mariam to tell us, in fact, we don't have to say, Mariam, if you were minister, Mariam, as minister, what can we do for you, and what can we do for your staff? And so that's just another strategy, you know, just to complement what has been said here. This is the real thing, and she, of course, and people here, we know how difficult it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I don't know if Mariam, you want to say a word just after that, or do you want to? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm actually in this space and I'm loving it because we need all the support that we can. It's just that sometimes with governments, egos get in the way. So it's important to get the approach right and to engage in the entry points that are willing to embrace. And I'm here to actually help with how to embrace. We have huge numbers of poor people, you know, and so I've been talking with Mark to see how can we improve on, how do we measure, how do we get our people out of poverty in the fastest time possible, how do we improve their human capital, you know, and how to engage in the right places is why I'm here. And I'm here to actually, you know, I want to work with everybody, and I commit to doing the best I can within the country and even at the, if necessary, in supporting what can be done at the UN level, so that there's an ecosystem that is sustainable in terms of the support that comes not just to Nigeria, but to all countries that actually need to ramp up in so many areas. So thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Mariam. I have already,
Elena.
I have two questions. So I have one from Chris, one from Sue, and I know that Eleanor is back. So maybe we'll start with Chris, Sue, and then Eleanor. Chris?
Yes, hello.
Go ahead.
So my question is pretty straightforward. I'm based here in Bangkok. I teach at a social enterprise program at a university. I have a social enterprise I'm trying to launch on my own. I have a lot of colleagues who've done these. The problem that I see with social enterprises that need any kind of meaningful investment is that they generally have to come up with it on their own. They find a way to get viable, and they just slug through things for a long time to get to where they can get the money they need. My question to the group is, how do we make more money available? How do we make the social enterprises more attractive to get that early stage funding that can unlock these opportunities? Because there's loads of great ideas that people are putting things together and they're launching them, or they're trying to launch them, but money is continually, I see, a really big problem for unlocking these opportunities.
Perfect, thank you. As the time flies, then Sue, can you go forward?
I just wanted to reflect back what I heard you say to see if you think it's the right thing to report back to Vic and Matthew Bishop tomorrow. And I can include some of what Chris just said was actually very useful, so I can always add more things on. So what I heard in terms of what we want in the resolution is a focal person in every country and at the UN itself, and appointments at the subnational level. That we want governments to say what they want. We want them to have transparent national plans with metrics so we can be clear about what they want. And that we are approaching this in a spirit of collaboration and service, that we want to help bring our expertise to support the government in delivering their aims. And then what I just heard Chris say, and I can add on other points, is that we would like, if there are sort of incentives for business or other economic actors, we'd like social entrepreneurs to be well considered in those programs. So do tell me if I didn't get that right, but from what everybody said, that felt like the key points.
Yeah, I think you've made a good summary, and you're helping me very well with that. I know that Eleanor Allen told me that you might want to intervene, so please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I was just really enjoying the comments today and listening and learning from all of you. And what it made me reflect on is I'm happy to share our experience at Water for People. So we changed our model 10 years ago from building water infrastructure with philanthropic funds, donations, to really a co-partnership with government. So how we do it today, and this, again, we have 10 years of data on this, plenty of failures, but it's working quite well now, is we set up a legal agreement with the district, and we also work with national ministries. And the district we require co-financing. Our global average is 35% of the capital is coming from district or national government. So we won't work anywhere where we don't have that co-funding. And then we also require that district to set up a water and sanitation office to charge for service of water delivery and to have safe water, so some sort of treatment and metering. And those are prerequisites, but now that we've been doing it for some time, the districts know this, so they won't even approach us if they don't have that buy-in, because what we do is when we work over there, and these are 5 to 10 year programs because hundreds of thousands of people in district typically. So we build up that human capacity of the operators, the district water and sanitation office managers and the maintenance workers, and they run the systems, and then we move on to another district. So those are, and we have checklists and models and all kinds of things behind that. But this was built over a period of since 2010, when it was just an idea, to now where we have lots of data and things we tried that didn't work. So I've been speaking to Drew. I don't know if we have it actually documented somewhere, but it's probably something that we could piece together. And I think all these things we learned the hard way, so I'd love to share. And this is clearly our model today: only partner with government. And we're kind of servant leadership. We want governments to serve people with water and sanitation. And so we help enable from behind, but also teach and build their capacity. So I just was thinking about that as I was hearing the speakers today.
Definitely, it would be very, very, very nice if you could share it with us, and even if it's not directly linked to the resolution, but probably we could add some and have the idea. I think Karen, you want to react, right?
I did. Eleanor, I hear someone.
Yes. I don't know who's the microphone on.
Here we go. It's
perfect.
okay, it's good now. I just wanted to plug Eleanor's previous session that I watched. I couldn't join live, but I did watch the video of it that everyone can see on the Catalyst site, where she does a lot more describing of their program, and it's amazing and really worth looking at to learn more about the way that they work. It was so inspiring, and I learned a lot. I really enjoyed watching it. So thank you for that. And everybody go look at it on the previous session.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, it was really great. And just to mention that we have the same philosophy. So we sign an agreement with the government. We don't actually require cash, but we do require that there's an agreement that everybody that deals with children will go through our university certificate program. So whether it's the Supreme Court justices that deal in family court, to everybody in the early childhood space, protection. So we've put, from top to bottom, and it's a pretty hefty commitment. So it's 5 months, 1 day a week for policymakers, and it's 8 months, 1 day a week for practitioners, center directors, supervisors. So we won't go work with a government if there's not an agreement ahead of time that all of those people are going to go through the university certificate program, because we don't feel that we can actually create sustainable change and get the kind of buy-in that we need and understanding for movement and co-creation if we don't have that as a basic premise. So
thank you, Karen, for your input. I think Gero, then you want to talk. I just wanted to answer as well a quiz question. France is quite a big country as well. You can suppose that we have a lot of money, but we have the same problem with the the early stage with our social entrepreneurs. So I think that's definitely something that we should work on, definitely as well developing countries. I think we all have that same problem. In France, we call it the Death Valley. definitely. Yeah, definitely, that's a very good point. And I think also what we wanted to push, the High Commissioner for France, what we want in the UN resolution is to have social economy to be recognized, as well to help with all the financial ecosystem. We're working on different, solidarity finance, as well as impact investing, we're philanthropy, we're working on many subjects. But I think the early stage and how you can help social enterprise to really, be from the idea to the real concrete action is really important. So thank you for bringing it. Jiru, maybe?
Yeah, I had two points. One is a request to all the speakers that if you all have all worked with government. Dan, you have a 5-point approach with village reach and all the people. Martin, you have a clear way you're working. Eleanor, you mentioned. It would be, Karen, you mentioned, if you could just put them down in 5 or 7 points in the Google document that's we'll circulate immediately after this call. Please don't waste too much time. Just put down the top 5 to 7 points which come into your mind. I think that is the most important. The reason for that is when we compile the report, then we'll take what are the commonalities across everybody. And even for CYFI, we had 10 points. And if you have any reference material, please give them. For the reason is that all of this will go into the Catalyzing Change report, which we will be also compiling. So Sue's got the resolutions, which she will share tomorrow, and we'll sharpen. We have Lara, who's been listening quietly to the call, who is working with Matthew. So she's going to compile all of these things, which we then put into the report. And then as phase 2 of the report of Matthew, we are actually going to create a more in-depth document with McKinsey on how to work with countries. So I think this all helps us, and we need to learn from all of you and compile all the wealth of experience. So when we make a proposal, and supposing Sarah is successful in getting these 2 resolutions through for what's happening at the country level, then we are able to basically say, okay, learning from all the mistakes that we have made, learning from all the good points, here is what countries can do. And then we've taken in all the points from the countries like Miriam and everybody, plus we've taken in our learnings, and we have something to go to the countries. So sorry for my bit long-winded, but we need all your points to compile, to put into a joint report, along with the resolutions. And please make sure you all are there on the call tomorrow, really.
Perfect. I think, Jiru, that's a good way to end this meeting, unless somebody wants to add something. But no, I don't see any raised hands. So thank you very much. That's been very fruitful and very instructive, as usual with social entrepreneurs. That's always a good, a good moment for me. And I think Sue already made a lot of summarize. And then, as Jiru said, please participate. Please add the different points, your priorities, and share good practice. So we will send you also the link for the meeting with Vic Van Vuren. As I said in the introduction, Vic Van Vuren is the chairman of the task force of the interagency at the UN. So he's the one who really brought the resolution forward. So to have your inputs from the ground as social entrepreneurs, that would be, I think, very important. As you know, social economy is very broad. You can have mutuals, cooperatives, and different NGOs, but social entrepreneurs, I think, should have their word. So please be there on the fireside chat with Vic tomorrow, and then we'll need your different points and priorities. So thank you again very much, and I look forward continuing working with you, and then see you again on Zoom next time for another session. Bye, everyone.